Hey YouTube, it's Raining Card Games, and welcome back to another episode of Yugioh Wilderness. So for today's episode, we've hit the water, and we're on the search for some aquatic Yugioh monsters. So if we're lucky and quiet enough, we should be able to find some really interesting stuff out on the river. And I hope you guys know how to swim. So, as I mentioned in the intro, we're out on the river today looking for some very specific aquatic Yugioh wildlife. So in most cases, when you think of Yugioh aqua or water type monsters, you're usually looking at the marine meta. So stuff like Atlanteans, mermaids, marincess, more of the stuff that you mostly associate with the water attribute. But if we're in the freshwater meta, there are a lot more interesting cards that you usually will not see in your average Yu-Gi-Oh climate. So you just have to be really careful and patient sometimes, because a lot of these species that you can find in the rivers are only there during certain times of the day or certain times during the year, as then some of these species are migratory. So we'll keep an eye out and hopefully we'll get lucky today. So we're approaching some rapids right now, and what you can tell usually is that in different types of water, choppy or smooth, you'll find different Yu-Gi-Oh species depending on how rough or clear the water is, because different Yu-Gi-Oh monsters are adapted to different types of environments. So for example, we're just gonna clear a few rocks here and push through, and if we reach down, and got one. Perfect. We found a Miyasirozame. These guys love to hang out in more rough waters where there's a lot more air in the water, because if you know white water, that's actually oxygen being pumped into the water. So whenever you see rapids, you know that there's a lot of oxygen in that environment, and these guys love a high oxygen environment, and we're really lucky that we were able to find one. So we'll go ahead and drop them back into the drink. We got something up ahead. Let's see if we can't quietly get up close. We don't want to scare this one, because this Yu-Gi-Oh monster is really shy and will dart at its first opportunity. So if we're quiet, we can get real close to it. It's a nimble beaver. So this Yu-Gi monster is very, very important in freshwater metas. He's able to establish his own territory on the playing field, and that playing field essentially attracts more water attribute monsters. So for example, when he's summoned to the field, he'll set up his location, his presence on the field. This then will attract other nimble monsters, and it'll make a nice clan. And if we get any closer, he's probably going to go inside his lodge and he'll be safe. But it's really amazing that we're able to find him out here, because previously these cards were hunted for their cardboard, and their cardboard was used for a wide variety of hats, paper maches, and other kinds of things. So since then, their populations have gone up with reprints, and it's really nice that we're able to find one out here on the river. But I don't want to get any closer, just so that we don't spook him, and we'll leave him to building his lodge, but let's keep on paddling downstream. So, another interesting thing to note about Yu-Gi monsters that use rivers as their own meta climate is that it's not always that they're using the water. As you can see, it's a large open space. So there is a lot of sunlight, which these Yugioh monsters can take advantage of. So let's go ahead and head on over to a downed tree in the middle of the river and see what we can find. So let's get in close. Come here, big guy. Well, an island turtle. These guys love to bask out on these logs. So if you've noticed, a lot of times what these will do, they will just find a nice log that has a lot of sunlight and they will lay out where all the herbaceous material on their backs can just take in the sunlight and they can relax, and they don't really have to worry too much because they do have a high defense, as you can note by their 2000 defense stat. So usually most things in this meta don't bother them too much, and if something does threaten them, all they have to do is jump off into the log and back into the drink. So we're gonna go ahead and put this guy right back where we found him, and probably as soon as we release him, he's gonna jump right into the water. Always important to keep in mind that in every aquatic meta, there's always an aerial meta that's hanging right around, and there are plenty of wind attribute monsters and winged beasts that are waiting to take advantage of some of the aqua and fish type monsters. Oh, nice, nice, nice. So we are super lucky. We actually caught a Kayaking salmon. Now, you may be wondering, how on earth is a very big level 5 fish monster with such beefy attack doing up here in a nice tranquil river? Well, the reason is he came up here to spawn. You see, Kayaking salmon travels between two different meta climates. When they're in this adult stage, for most part, they are spending their time out in the open ocean meta, where they have to contend with all those threats that I mentioned earlier, such as mermail. But when it's time to come and spawn and they have to lay their eggs, they will come up into these more tranquil freshwater streams where they can lay their eggs, and the eggs can hatch and grow in this river climate because there are less threats posed to the young. And then once they're big and strong enough, they will head back out into the open ocean, where they will continue to grow into big, powerful monsters with 2,400 pounds of raw protein, lean, mean muscle. And then when it's time again, they will come upstream and spawn. This guy is quite the hefty creature, and I am so happy we were able to find him. Now, if you guys know anything about RCG here, you guys should know that this actually is one of the first Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that I ever pulled from a pack. And I have a lot of sentimental feelings towards this fish type monster, but I am just super psyched that we were able to come out here and catch, and it's incredible. So essentially this guy will come spawn up here, and then after he's essentially done all of his deeds, he will find a nice comfortable spot where he will gradually pass away into the graveyard. But that won't be the end of his journey. Because he is such a powerful monster, he is still able to sustain this entire beautiful river climate. All different kinds of winged beast type monsters will take advantage of him in order to power themselves up and equip his protein mass to their attack stat and be able to continue and survive. All these salmonoid monsters play a huge, important role in the river meta, and it is amazing. And oh, I am just so happy we were able to find this guy. But he's a fish type monster, so we are going to go ahead and put him back in the drink before he dehydrates, because fish out of water, am I right? See you, bud. now I gotta go dry off. And that is going to do it for this episode of Yugioh Wilderness, but you guys know the drill. I'm not letting you out of here without a little bit of real life Yugioh Wilderness knowledge. So let's talk about rivers and river conservation. So one of the big threats to rivers is, you can probably guess by now, the rate of how the series goes, it's pollution. And who are the polluters? Take a guess. It's people. Most cases, it's going to be people threatening these kind of climates. In fact, it's always going to be people threatening these kind of climates in some shape or form. Now, let's talk about a few threats to rivers. One of the big things is actually not the river itself, it is deforestation. Why would I say deforestation? Well, you see, one of the reasons why I say deforestation is a huge threat to rivers is because, if you've noticed, there are trees along the riverside, and this is what we call a riparian buffer. Riparian buffers are really important in maintaining the health of rivers, because think of it like you're lining the river with a sponge. What do sponges do? They absorb things. So whenever you have runoff from a thunderstorm or runoff coming from a agricultural field, instead of going directly into the water, these riparian buffers will absorb all these extra nutrients and runoff and basically slow down the transfer rate and discharge into rivers, which overall can keep them cleaner and more healthy. And cleaner rivers means there's going to be more abundant wildlife and more thriving ecosystems. So riparian buffers are not just a single line of trees that are right alongside the riverbank. No, they have to be a little bit larger than that. So normally a nice, healthy, pristine riparian buffer ideally would be massive. It would be an entire forest. But at the bare minimum, you want to have at least 50 to 100 feet of tree line that can serve as that buffer zone to protect the river on either side, because runoff can easily pass through a single line of trees, and that tree or trees will not be able to catch every single bit. That's why it's important to have a larger riparian buffer to ensure the safety of the river. Now, another threat to rivers besides deforestation is obviously direct pollution, such as point and non-point pollution. So, for example, water can actually be a pollutant. Now, if you live in areas where you have a lot of fast-flowing, colder rivers, warm water can be one of the most dangerous things to the wildlife living inside that river. For example, if you go up to New England, you have a lot of fast and cold-flowing rivers. Warm water coming off from factories can have a huge impact on the salmonoid species, specifically trout, that you would find in those rivers. Trout have a very, very tolerant threshold of temperature. So, for example, if you're in a stream that is 54 degrees Fahrenheit, those trout are living happily and they are able to reproduce and thrive in that community. But if there is a factory right upstream that is discharging only warm water, that's their only pollutant, what's the big deal? It's just water. That increase in temperature, so let's say the water hits 58 degree temperature threshold, those trout can no longer tolerate the warmer waters and they will start to die out. And then you'll see the population numbers crash, and pretty soon, if that water in the river continues to warm and warm and warm, you will never see trout in that river again. That's why it is very important to monitor what we are putting into our rivers, because we also, as people, use them as a resource. So a lot of reservoirs are actually just dammed up rivers. And what do we use reservoirs for? Pretty much everything. That is where we get our drinking water. That is where we get our water for plumbing. If you're living off of city water, all of these reservoirs provide the key critical resource, which is fresh water. So it's very important to monitor what we're putting into rivers, because otherwise you're kind of drinking gunk, and you do not want that, because then there's a whole slew of health problems that come with it. Now, there are some simple ways that you can help maintain the health and status of the rivers. For example, one of the easiest things that you do not even need any kind of degree for is a river cleanup. All you have to do is hop online, search up the closest river cleanup near you, and you can immediately have a direct impact on the health of a river by removing stuff that would either get washed downstream and eventually into the ocean, and then also you're making the area more peaceful and more beautiful for recreational purposes. So it's a win-win in both sides, and then you're also helping a river out, and you can feel good about it, that you're actually impacting the environment around you in a positive way. Now, there are other ways as well. You can get more involved with scientific communities and doing research on species in rivers, or helping with planting riparian buffers. There are all these different kind of fun ways that you can basically improve the environmental status of a river nearby. Now, I have some links down below in the description that you guys can check out if you're interested in river conservation, basic cleanup procedures, and also some of the species that we talked about today on the river. Now, that's going to do it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. I really do appreciate your support. And then also check out some of the other links that we have down below in the description. But that's going to do it for me. I'm going to get back out on the water. And I'll catch you in the next episode.